ahead with the meeting?
Yes, Anuja, we should be on to go now. Yes, please.
Are we
Yeah.
all here?
Yeah.
Yeah, compliments of the season from the African chapter of American Academy of Optometry. Today we are going to have a beautiful presentation by two different special speakers. We will start our program with the prayer, opening remarks by Dr. Godwin, and followed by the presenters, and we have question and answer session, and closing remarks by Professor Dr. Levan. And of course, we'll end with the prayer. So if there's no volunteer, I'm asking for some volunteer to start off with the prayer.
Shall
If
we
not,
pray?
yeah. Is there a
Our
volunteer?
Father God, we thank you for a day like this. We thank you for helping us to be part of this wonderful family. We thank you for the African chapter and the many successes it has chopped over the years. We thank you for our first meeting as a group where we're going to learn about how to become better fellows, especially our brothers and sisters who are also desiring to gain fellowship. We thank you for our facilitators. We thank you for the participants. We thank you for the entire African optometry group body that you continue to be with us, help us grow, rise, and continue to get more wins. We pray that throughout all this program and throughout the year, you will be with us and direct us, and we'll continue to see your faithfulness and grace. These are many other blessings we ask through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. I'm sure with the doctor's prayer, we are blessed with our speakers having clarity and our recipients having open heart and mind to learn to ultimately bring healing to our patients. So let's start with a beautiful opening remarks by Dr. Godwin. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to welcome every one of us to our first event for this year. This webinar is being designed to address certain issues, especially as candidates are just about rounding up their papers for the first submission, which is due in on the 1st of February. We wanted to put this in place because we wanted to begin to do some of those things about academic writing. And I think a couple of weeks ago, I was chatting with somebody, and the person made a statement that I find a bit offensive. He said, Africans, when they write, they don't do. And I was like, oh, okay. But then I think it's good for us to have this conversation around plagiarism and then around the emerging AI and how that impacts on academic integrity. And we have two erudite colleagues who will be giving those presentations tonight. So I just wanted to use a way to welcome every one of us. And this session is not just for those who will be submitting their papers. If you're involved in academic writing in one form or the other, I think this presentation is equally valuable to each and every one of us. So on that note, I will just welcome the speakers and thank them for volunteering to be with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Godwin, for ourselves in writing makes a lot of difference, even from my experience as a candidate before. Today we have a very good speaker, Professor Diane. She's an Honorable Associate Professor of Optometry at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and National Research Foundation rated researcher and adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia, Canada. She brings over 15 years of academic as well as global leadership experience across health profession, education, international development, and eye health, with a particular focus on strengthening optometry training and expanding access to eye care in developing contexts. She's a founder and host of Life Beyond Clinical Practice podcast, Let us hear this thought leader on professional identity, professional alignment, and career reinvention for healthcare professionals, and with a passion to help clinical scholars build globally an impactful career. So she's here to widen our knowledge of artificial intelligence in academic writing. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Thanuja, and thank you to the African chapter for this invitation to talk about a very important topic. And admittedly, my disclaimer is I'm not an expert in AI, but I acknowledge that as an academic and someone in the space, that it's so important to talk about emerging issues around the use of AI in academic writing. So privileged to talk about it and to share my experience with using AI and what I think some of, the cautionary notes should be for emerging scholars in the space. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, Diane, we can.
Yes,
we can hear you.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if sorry, I just want to hide.
Yeah, we request everybody to put your microphone on mute, please.
Thank you. Okay, so just to open up our talk today is really to set the context that researching in the age of AI or artificial intelligence has changed the game. I think in most respects, probably not so much for good, because as you'll see later in my presentation, it's really started to cast a lot of doubt over some academic outputs, because we can go further, faster with AI. That's the reality. There's concerns also about how much of what is generated in the research space is actually researchers' intellectual property and not what they've sourced through, whether it's generative AI or other sources that we'll hear about later in the second presentation about plagiarism. But really, I want to just set the context for us to understand what does it mean to be an academic scholar? How can we work responsibly with AI tools in this emerging space? And what are some of the benefits and sort of red flags that we just need to be aware of? So yes, AI is there. It doesn't replace our thinking as academic scholars. It cannot replace scholarship and academia, but it's really there as a tool to help us to get further faster, as I said. So I want to just, open with this quote that AI can write like a human, but it can't think like a scholar. So I really hope that at the end of today's presentation that you understand that there's a clear distinction between what it means to be an academic scholar, and what it means to just produce a piece of writing that sounds wonderful, because AI is really good at that. So that's my goal for today's presentation, is to underscore why it's important to maintain scholarly integrity, voice, and ownership of your intellectual property, your academic outputs in the age of AI. So let's start off with some principles of academic writing. I mentioned the word scholarly, and scholarship is really about just applying our minds to answering research questions through critical thinking, objectivity. These are all underlying principles that for generations, have defined scholarship in academic spaces. It's also evidence-based, and one of the challenges you'll hear about in this presentation is that some of the generative AI tools are really good at pulling together so-called evidence, but it's not as good at critical thinking, which is the human factor, right? There's really big concerns about the credibility of sources that AI tools put forward when you work with them. So some of the red flags, but scholarship is really just that, evidence-based, choosing the right evidence sources that are credible, that are aligned with your research objectives, that add to the logical flow of your research argument or paper or whatever it is. So there's a defined structure to the way we write. All of these are, and actually there are skills and competencies that you develop as a scholar. whether you're in postgraduate studies or whether you're just doing it as part of the process, for example, now in the fellowship program, it is really a competency that you should develop and not become over-reliant on the tools that make it quicker and easier to get the output desired. Academic writing paraphrases rather than relying on direct extracts. And I think in the next presentation, we'll talk a lot about that when it comes to plagiarism, which historically has plagued academic writing with this sort of copy-paste chunks, whether in academic articles. I've seen it a lot with postgraduate students that I've worked with. Even if it's just a paragraph, if you don't paraphrase it, it's not your own work. And then if you don't cite it, that's other challenges which we will hear about in presentation number 2. So academic writing is really an iterative process, right? It's a revision for refinement. We have an idea, we come up with a framework, we do the first draft, we find more literature, we integrate it into our first draft, we rewrite until we get to this place where there's a logical flow, a credible argument backed by validated sources that are kind of in your area of interest. And then what does it mean to be an academic scholar? As an academic scholar, critical thinking is fundamental. Now, one of the major challenges with artificial intelligence is that they produce output so quickly that it takes away your ownership of critical thinking as a scholarship competency, right? But as an academic scholar, you should be a critical thinker. Your role is to advance knowledge through original analysis, evidence-based arguments, not just something that sounds nice on paper, which AI is wonderful at doing, but is it an evidence-based argument that is contextually relevant, that, pulls in from your perspective as the researcher is often lost if you just rely on these AI tools, and as well as ethical inquiry. Ethics is so fundamental in research, and your integrity as a researcher or a scholar must be maintained at all costs. So yeah, prioritize integrity, honesty in sources and methods, how you approach your research. These are fundamental attributes of being an academic scholar, or even if you're not an academic, you're a clinician who's writing a paper that's sort of considered scholarship. Your integrity is very important. Also, your voice in the writing of this academic paper or this clinical case report, whatever it is so important to maintain. And if I'm pretty sure if your first case report is due, you've been reading research papers, and if you've been reading them with intent, you would have noticed that different authors write differently. There's a particular style, if you're reading authors in a particular space, that you notice that a researcher has a voice. Now, most papers these days have multiple authors, so I understand it can't be one researcher's voice, but when you look at your own writing, you know your voice, and that's how it sounds when you put your words on paper. So whatever you generate as a scholar must sound like you. Yes, of course, it has to be grammatically correct. It has to sound scholarly and academic. We can't use colloquial language in academic writing, but at the same time, it must sound authentically you. So we are accountable for that as academic scholars and in academic writing. So key traits is curiosity driven. You are the architect, the intellectual architect behind whatever it is you are required to research, put together, etc. Artificial intelligence is a tool to help you do that a little bit better, and we'll talk about what that means. Another key trait, like I mentioned, ethics. Ethics is critically important. Own your work, to uphold principles of integrity so that the academic fraternity doesn't fall apart in the age of AI. We must keep our consciences clear by making sure that the work we generate is ours. And then thinking of it as collaborative, yet independent. So working with AI tools, and even in, pre-AI, as an academic scholar, you would work with others, but also maintain your independent thought and scholarship in the process of collaboration. And the same principle applies when we work with AI tools. So now I just wanted to present some of the sort of real issues that have emerged over the past year or so when it comes to AI. Now, this is a space where currently there's so much of debate about what are the limits of the use of AI in academic writing. And on the slide, you see that even Nature, which you know is probably the top most respected journal in sort of, internationally in in the health space, they did a poll of over 5,000 researchers, and they found that even amongst the researchers they surveyed, there's this conflict about, is it okay to use AI to write scientific papers or to contribute to the writing of scientific papers? So these debates are ongoing. And I think while there isn't people have different opinions about to what extent we should use AI tools, the fundamentals are that we must remember what academic scholarship is, what our role is as scholars or people writing papers, clinical papers, as clinicians who want to present yourself as an intellectual in the space, that you have to guard your integrity, guard your intellectual property, and your ownership of what you put out. Another one is, this is just, as I said, in the last year, I just pulled things up. You see that a new study showed that artificial intelligence is widespread. It's exposed publication fraud across the globe. And ChatGPT, and I'm not, disclaimer, I'm not naming or shaming any, but it's probably the dominant generative AI tool, large language model that people use in the world. And in my experience, I stay away from it when it comes to being my assistant in academic writing, because while it can produce wonderful things in a matter of seconds, and I'll show you my example that I just did this morning shortly, it struggles to produce reliable references. You see it there. It creates authors and papers and studies that don't exist. And that is the biggest issue with AI currently, that it seems so credible on paper, but if you don't do your work of vetting and see it as an assistant or tool and go back and fact check, you could find yourself in hot water. Now, if at the level of the US, last year, Make America Healthy Again, this whole campaign that they came up with, this report of how to sort of transform, American healthcare, so much of it was found to be generated by AI and actually not factual. Now, I copied and pasted. I knew that this was an issue that had emerged over the past year or so, and I just wanted to pull up what are the issues. So I typed in Google, Make America Healthy Again report, fake reference, and that's what Google AI overview. And I like using this. It gives me a snapshot, and on the right, you can see it gives you links to actual sources that you can go and verify and read in more depth. But that's not the point. The point is, I wanted to highlight what it pulled up in terms of this report that was being positioned to the world as, this is why we need to change healthcare in America and what we need to do. Found that there were fabricated studies in the report, which if you as a scholar just simply use these tools as the shortcut to getting the output you require, this is the hot water you're going to land in, because it will pull up fabricated studies. If you don't go and do your homework and verify, it will be found out. Non-existent authors, very common, okay? And it will say Charles et al. 2015 in this report. But when you actually go and search for it, that doesn't exist. It's happened to me where a student was doing some work and I'm like, okay, let me just vet these references. And every single one of them actually didn't exist. And huge red flags, right? So if you just take it and if you think somebody's not going to check, well, chances are they are going to check and you'll be found out, right? So you have to take ownership of the process. Then hallucinated citations. AI expert noted that citations, which included broken links, misstated conclusions, all of these, if you're just using it to get further faster without using your scholarly, ethical ownership of the process of refinement, then your work is discredited. And then, of course, fictitious examples, repeated errors, and, people with the keen eye will quickly pick up what is written by AI, especially in the case of if you have a mentor, a supervisor, if you're a postgraduate student, they know how your writing sounds, they know your style. It's so easy to pick up what is not your work. So using tools is really just a starting point, but you've still got to do the work of putting together a credible, logical, scientifically sound report at the end of the day. And then, of course, this case, I think in December of last year, where this university professor had to step down for a very similar thing. AI-generated references, not credible, same issues that I noted in the previous slide, right? So it's affecting people's academic careers, reputations that were built over a lifetime. And look, it may have been just an oversight. Maybe it was a collaborative paper, or maybe it was one of his graduate students and he didn't go and check himself, but his name was on the paper. So it cost him his academic career, right? So this is the severity of the consequences if you use AI tools irresponsibly. So AI... Sorry, we just need someone to mute their mic, please. Thank you. So the role of AI in academic writing is really a tool to assist you in the writing and formulation process, but it's not a replacement for your scholarship. It has the potential to amplify efficiency. So as I said, you want to just get a sense of what is out there, what is the, current landscape in a particular area, or what is broad evidence saying about something. You just want to get a sense as a starting point, or you want it to help you to frame a research problem or get more insight, but you still have to take that output and work with it. So it amplifies efficiency. It can save you time, but it cannot replicate your insight, your ethical judgment, your personal voice, as I said, and experience as a researcher in that process. So responsible use preserves your integrity as a scholar. If you're a researcher, if you're academic, you're just simply a clinical professional like most of you, right? But you want to research, publish, whatever, put things out there that state that this is my expertise, this is what I've done. You must be able to sleep at night knowing that that's your work, knowing that you applied your own intellect and competencies to putting that paper, clinical report, whatever, because misuse of AI is eroding trust and fast in the academic space. So I remember when I started out very early, even just as an undergrad student, the way we sourced information when we had projects or assignments was sort of really old school. You went to the library, you searched books, you scoured things, you drafted, you sketched, you reworked. And yes, understandably, that took hours and days and weeks sometimes. And modern technology has changed that. At a click of a button, we can get a lot of this information now very quickly. So the temptation is to shortcut because the output seems credible on the surface. But if not done and utilized correctly, we can punch so many holes in it and then cast a shadow of doubt on your reputation and the quality of your work. So here's how AI helps. Idea generation. So as I said earlier, to brainstorm topics, outlines, you want to present a clinical case in whatever diagnosis, and, help me put together a framework for how this case should be presented. For example, give me the key structure or outline or framework, but the actual work will still be what you do. So those are some of the ways, give you, or you can copy paste what you've written. Okay. And then ask these tools, are there things that I'm missing? What is an alternate angle to look at this problem? Some gaps that maybe I've overlooked that are important to include, and then it will highlight those things. And again, you just take that as the first step and you work on integrating that into your paper. So research assistance, it can help you summarize sources, identify gaps in literature, like I said, process large data set for patterns, which again is just a starting point. That's not the analysis. You can also use it for editing and refinement. Look, not all of us are great at writing in English, so you can write it, ask it to sort of just give you a more, slightly more, maybe not polished, but I mean, to rephrase it somewhat. And then you take that sort of template and then you rework it to something that sounds like you, perhaps words you use that were not scholarly or whatever the thing might be, right? But you can just use it for a process of making your work a little bit more refined if you feel especially that writing skills are a bit of a weakness, right? You can do grammar checks and things like that with these AI tools. Now, the truth of the matter is, like I said, most of the work is still yours. AI is really just there as an assistive tool, but the temptation is real. All over YouTube, you'll see things like this. Write an academic paper in 30 minutes, and it shows you all these ways. But the output, if you look at the way I've just presented what scholarship is and what scholarly work and academic writing should be, this is not academic scholarship. It's knowing how to beat the system. And I don't know this person and I'm not naming and shaming, but I'm just using this as an example that it can be very tempting to follow these things and think that you are doing okay. Think that you're following a proven system and that you won't get found out, or that what is produced at the end is your work. But in reality, it's not. Okay, you've just found a smart way to use AI to write something that's not really your intellectual property at the end of the day, because I still review papers for journals, my own research papers or articles and students' articles. And even just to review a near complete article takes me way more than 30 minutes. To really read it with intent and with a critical eye, and, is it covering all the bases? Does it sound logical? So there's no way you can produce a quality, credible academic paper or sort of piece of scholarship in 30 minutes or under. Now, here's my real life example that I mentioned earlier. So I thought, how can I demonstrate the real risk of defaulting to using AI to do the work for you? So this morning, I thought, let me just use a prompt. Now, prompt engineering is a whole nother science, and I'm not going to get into that in this presentation because the quality of your prompts really speaks to you, again, your intellectual input in the process, rather than just sort of leaving it to the AI tool. But I wrote, write me a polished introductory paragraph for a research paper I need to prepare on the responsible use of AI in academic writing. Under 6 seconds, this is what it gave me. Here's a polished, research-appropriate introductory paragraph you can use or adapt. Now, if I was maybe a student or clinician or someone not in the research space and I just didn't know how to write an introduction, it would be so easy to just copy-paste this, put it in my article, and think that nobody's going to know. So it sounds wonderful. The rapid integration of artificial intelligence into academic writing has introduced both unprecedented opportunities and significant ethical challenges, blah, 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 blah. And I can tell you now that's not how I write. Doesn't sound like me. I know my writing style. And anyone who knows you and who's seen your written work, if you just copied and paste this, would probably be able to say the same. So ideally, you should not be asking these tools to write for you. Give me an outline of key points I should consider when preparing a paper on AI in academic writing. It gives you, these are sort of 5 or 6 things you should touch on, right? And if you keep working with them, then they keep prompting you for more wonderful things. If you like, I can make it sound more theoretical, policy-oriented, blah, blah, blah. And you can literally go to town with all of these follow-up prompts and then end up with this wonderful paper in under 30 minutes that looks good on paper, but is a mishmash and a discredit to scholarship. It's actually not your work. It's not your intellectual property. You simply used a tool to produce an output, but not anything that has meaningful value that you can put your name onto as your own, okay? To be a scholar, you have to own the process from idea generation to formulation to iteration to eventually, the logical flow and output of your argument that you can present and say, hey, this is what I saw, this is what I did. You present the credible evidence that either supports or refutes that, and then you give your critical input into why you think, other scholars may have found different results, or how does that impact on your own results, and all of that. That's what it means to be a scholar. So how do you maintain your integrity with all of this? So I say use AI as a sparring partner, but refine with your expertise. So it's really there to help you if you feel stuck. Oh, what do I do? Give me some ideas, or what can I do? And you take that and you rework and you integrate it into what you're doing. And you rewrite things in your own words, like I said, paraphrase, not copy paste. It doesn't make sense. You need to be asking yourself, does this make sense? Does it actually align with what I'm doing? Or does it just sound nice on paper? Right? Always verify AI outputs against primary sources. I cannot stress that enough, especially if it's giving you things like so-and-so did this, blah, blah. Verify that, like your life depends on it. Because especially if you're using ChatGPT, I find for academic writing, Grok is much more reliable in terms of the credibility of sources. It actually gives you links to any citations or the papers it references. So you can go in there, verify, read those primary sources, see if it actually is, the message is actually correct and aligns with what you are writing. And then apply changes selectively to preserve your voice. As I said, that under 6-second extract exercise that I did this morning, that did not sound like my voice. Sounded lovely, but it did not sound like my voice. And of course, disclose the use of specific tools in the method section. If you have used it for a purpose, there's, again, there's differences of opinion around this, but in the interest of transparency, if you've used an AI tool to help you to draft or put together something, disclose that, but don't cite. AI is not a person, they're not an author. You cannot cite them in the reference section, you cannot cite an AI tool. So working with AI is a process of it helping you in the refinement process, okay? Treat it as a consultant for input into your rough ideas, or otherwise just to finalize the end product in a way that feels authentically you. But it's important to preserve your own voice as a scholar. The writing must be distinctive of your personal style in analytical tone. If you've not written before, of course, you're still figuring those things out, but which is why you should own the writing process and not leave it to something that's generated by AI. You know the kinds of words you use, like in that example I used, I think one of the words that was used was grappling. Something was grappling with. I know I don't use that word ordinarily in my academic writing. I may use it in my day-to-day language. So things like that on paper doesn't sound like me, okay? Argumentative flair, it must be reflective of your expertise and perspective. And finally, ask yourself, does this sound like me? Does it sound like you? End of the day, when you read the whole thing, is this your voice? Can you truly say this is your output? And rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until it reflects your work. Include your own insight and particularly context. And this is where AI can't replace humans or the human scholar, because it doesn't have your lens, your lived experience lens, the context of where you live and work, and so cannot fully integrate that appropriately into the writing. So in essence, in summary, the final output must be your intellectual property. You must be at peace, be able to sleep at night knowing that whatever you produce is actually your work. You put in the hours. Yes, AI tools can save you time. As I said, like when we were students or young researchers, we used to go to the library, spend hours reading different articles, printing, downloading. AI has made it a lot easier, but you've still got to do the work of intellectual analysis and critique and argument development and all of those things. So be mindful of these things and avoid letting AI write entire sections for you, accepting the facts generated by AI as facts without checking, not paraphrasing AI outputs properly, Be cautious of using AI to bypass effort, which is the biggest risk, because it's just so easy to produce something that looks credible on the surface, like I said, because this undermines scholarly growth and also the integrity of scholarship. And of course, avoid copy pasting without personalization. So these guardrails should be what you employ as you write your papers. Use AI only as an ideas partner, okay, as a starting point for refinement, but you must expand with your scholarly input and analysis. Use it as an integrity checklist, apply an integrity checklist. Is this my idea? Have I cited sources? Have I verified the sources? Does it reflect my voice? And finally, institutional alignment. If it's an organization, an institution, a university, make sure you are following their specific ethics and guidelines when it comes to the use of these tools. So this is my sort of final slide, just summary of everything I've said today. AI in academic writing helps us by refining, giving us ideas for inspiration, and sort of shortening the path to output to a certain extent. But we must use it responsibly to ensure and maintain academic integrity. It's important also to maintain your scholarly voice, guard your reputation, but experiment ethically with these tools, because ultimately it's a partnership where you lead. AI should not and cannot do the work of scholars. Okay, you still lead the process. You merely use it as a tool to help you to get to the output, either as a time saver or things you may have missed, and just as a checking partner. Okay, so that's my talk for today. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope it was insightful and that you learned something. And you can listen to the podcast, Life Beyond Clinical Practice, or follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram, or reach out to me on email if you have any specific questions. Thank you so much.
Professor Van Staden, I simply love the lines with your sweet voice. Artificial intelligence can write like a human and not think like a scholar. Absolutely. Who can think critical, argue with an evidence, cover ethics completely? Professor did emphasize on giving priority to honesty, generating one's unique voice, and owning one's own intellectual property or output. On a positive note, I did see Professor Levy using artificial intelligence as a tool to type his notes. That is the positive point of it. But we heard you loud and clear, ma'am, that AI can generate fabricated citations that can put us into trouble, especially at the cost of academic careers, which you're very particular about, especially the ones coming up in the generation who you are protecting and are very fond of. Yes, we are not giving in pressure into this kind of temptation, and use it responsibly to brainstorm, identify the gaps and improvements in clarity. Yes, Professor Godwin, we can illuminate the path to knowledge, as you mentioned on the chat box. And we also saw the comment from Professor Richter that journals are requesting declaration of the use of AI in academic writings. So thank you, ma'am. That was very extensive and very useful. We will move on to the next presentation. We do have question and answer session, which the recipients can type on the chat box or open the mic to ask questions after the next presentation. If that is fine by you, Professor. Can we move on to the next presenter?
Absolutely. And I just want to, can you hear me? Am I still on mute? Yes. Oh, I just wanted to say, I forgot to say at the end, in full disclosure, I used AI tools simply to help me identify if my framework that I started with for this presentation. So I initially mapped out, this is what I want to do. This is what I think I want to present for this talk. okay, are there any things I'm missing, any pieces I should emphasize? So in full disclosure, that's how I used it to present today's talk as an example. But yes, we can move on to the next one. Thank you.
I'm sure you're not dependent on AI. Otherwise, you would not have chosen those lovely frame and that pendant on your neck. That comes from your original choice, isn't it? Professor Kelechi, is he around? Are you there, sir? Yeah, I can see him.
Yes.
Let me introduce you before we hear your voice too.
Hmm.
He's a professor of optometry and visual science, served as a senior lecturer in ophthalmology at Dunedin School of Medicine, University of Otago, New Zealand. His primary interests are education and research on optometry and vision science, as well as ophthalmology. Quite interesting. And current research interests include corneal collagen cross-linking for the management of corneal ectasia, the use of artificial intelligence in the management of oculovisual diseases, and tele-ophthalmology application in the eye care service delivery. He was instrumental in the implement of the first doctorate program in the Middle East. He has over 65 publications and many more to come. The professor was involved in the design and creation of the novel professional education and collaborative program of healthcare professionals in Saudi. He's the founding member of the Center of Eye Care Center and Public Education Intervention Initiative, CEPHII, formed to structure our young African researchers in public eye health. You are a known specialist for tele-ophthalmological services, and your special publication on child-to-child vision strategy, the Dunedin Project. So I'm sure the theft of intellectual property in the branch of is a breach of ethics. Let us hear Professor Kelechi on academic writing related to plagiarism and ethics. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Share. Okay, I'm sharing my screen now. Just make sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so to start, I want to sort of like talk about two basic concepts, things that we think we already know, but when I describe them to you now, you'll find that they're a little bit more complicated than we would normally assume. So let's start with two scenarios. First thing is, what is a lie? What does it mean when you say somebody has lied to you? I'll give you two scenarios. Number one, my friend Uche, whom I trust completely, tells me that the Senegal versus Morocco match, which caused a lot of controversy, the final was supposed to be played on 21st of January 2026. Then I go to my friend Godwin and I say to Godwin, because I trust Uche completely, Uche said the match is going to be played on the 21st of January 2026. I don't cross-check because I trust Uche completely. This is the first scenario. The second scenario is my friend Uche tells me, and I double-check, that the Senegal versus Morocco match for the AFCON 2025 is to be played on the 19th of January 2026. I then tell my frenemy, Godwin, that the match is going to be scheduled to be shown on the 21st of January, 2 days later, because I want Godwin to miss the live match. So the question is, did I lie both times or did I lie just one time? Both times I gave Godwin the wrong information. But the only time I lied was the second time, because the second time I knew the truth and I deliberately lied to Godwin with the specific intent of misleading him. What is the difference between those two times? Intent. This intent is a huge thing. Keep this in mind for later on when we start talking about intentional versus accidental plagiarism. Intent is very difficult to prove, but it's very easy to infer. It's a very, very interesting thing, because if somebody suspects you of plagiarism, if they manage to infer intent, they are much more likely to find you guilty. This is very important. Then the second thing is, what does taking ultimate responsibility look like? Dr. Diane said this very well, where she said you have to take responsibility for it. Taking responsibility, I've found in my career that it's something that many people don't quite understand. So let's go a little bit into this. Imagine a scenario in which we have 4 adult children. Both parents have traveled because they're going for a conference abroad. And so we have a 24-year-old, a 23-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 21-year-old. Left them at home. They're going to go for like a week or 2 weeks. And then the 24-year-old, being the eldest child, he or she has been told, every night you guys come back, make sure that all the doors and all the garages are locked and bolted. Okay? So that's what the 24-year-old has been charged with. One very long Friday after work and university studies, the siblings go out to a restaurant to eat. They come back late. They're all tired. And the 24-year-old sort of like yawning tells the 21-year-old, please go and make sure that the house is locked up and the garages are closed before going to bed. They all go to bed. 21-year-old forgets. And that night, thieves come into the house and basically steal everything from downstairs while all the children or adults are sleeping upstairs. Question is, whose fault was it? Some will argue, well, since the 21-year-old was dedicated to do the job, it's 21-year-old's fault. But actually, 24-year-old bore ultimate responsibility. So if the parents come back, the person who's at fault is the 24-year-old. This is what it means when we say the buck stops with me. You can call yourself a general overseer if you like, but you are responsible for checking something. If you have the ultimate responsibility, that means you have to do the final check. What the 24-year-old should have done is, even though she told the 21-year-old to do it, he or she had to go and do that final check to make sure that it was done. And this is something that you're going to have to get used to when you delegate stuff to other people or to AI. You can't say, well, the AI did it, it's not my fault. It's your fault because you're supposed to take the final check. This is very, very important. Very quickly, what's the outline of a scientific paper when you write? So papers generally begin with an abstract section and a keyword section. So the abstracts and the keywords will come after the title page. Then after that, we have something that we call the IMRAD. So introduction, methods, results, and discussion. After the discussion, you would have things like references, declarations, table and figure legends, and sections. The 2 sections where you're going to run the highest risk of running afoul of plagiarism, it's the introduction and the discussion. The methods and the results, written properly, you shouldn't have any problems with plagiarism, because that's exactly your words. In the methods, you're stating categorically, one by one, what you did, how you did it, getting your equipment and all that. It's going to be quite different what you did from what everybody else has done. So it's going to be if you do it properly, it's going to be very hard to run the risk of plagiarism for methods. Results, again, it's your numbers. What did you find? What graphs are you putting? Again, it's going to be very difficult to run afoul of the rules of plagiarism. The key parts to be careful is introduction and discussion. Question now, what is plagiarism? Plagiarism is very serious. It's an academic and moral misconduct where essentially you've taken somebody else's work and you're presenting it as if that work is yours. So essentially, plagiarism involves 2 things. One, some people say steal, but a lot of authors will rather say appropriate, because stealing is something. If I steal your car, I take your car away from you and you don't have it. If I steal your idea, the idea is still there, but I'm making inappropriate use of it. So let's say appropriate or misappropriate. You appropriate somebody else's work and then you present it as if it is yours. So that's two different things. You take the idea and then you pass it off as if it's yours. So note that if you remember my two friends earlier on, Uche and Godwin, if I steal Uche's work and I accredit that work and say it came from Godwin, it's actually not plagiarism. If I did that intentionally, it's wrong. It's morally wrong, it's fraudulent, but it's not plagiarism because I'm not passing off Uche's work as my work. What it is that I've misattributed it to Godwin. So that's a different kind of dishonesty. Plagiarism is actually complex. It involves many things. And one of the references here does a very, very good job of talking about all the semantic convolutions and different agreements and disagreements among researchers as to what exactly is plagiarism. But it involves things like ghostwriting. So ghostwriting is where, say you're a very good writer and somebody pays you money and you write the entire paper for them, and then you don't get acknowledged, they just pay you X amount of money, and then they publish the paper. Technically, the people who are writing that paper now are claiming credit for your work. So essentially, they are plagiarizing. That's number one. Then we have what we call the honorary author thing, where it's like, okay, you're writing this paper and you want either your spouse to be on the paper or you want your former boss to be on the paper and that kind of thing. And like, oh, well, he didn't really do anything, but, we're close. I'm going to include him as an author. That person who you have included as an author to agree to be an author in a paper that they did not contribute to is plagiarizing because they are taking somebody else's work and saying that they did it. Okay, so that's plagiarism in that sense. In some journals, it's been found that up to 1/3 of the published paper has a significant amount of plagiarized work within them. That's huge. And this study was done before we had problems with AI. As Dr. Diane said, now that we have AI, that's probably much, much higher now. So it's something that you have to be very careful about. What are the types of plagiarism? Remember, we talked about intentional plagiarism versus accidental plagiarism. So there's basically 5 here: self-plagiarism, direct plagiarism, paraphrasing plagiarism, mosaic plagiarism, and accidental plagiarism. Self-plagiarism, you're plagiarizing yourself. There's material that you have that you've published or that you've used before in your student project, and then you reuse that material without stating that you have used that material before. So you're plagiarizing yourself. That's self-plagiarism. Direct plagiarism is what we see a lot, where there's a paper that's published and you go to that paper and take 1 sentence or 2 sentences or 3 sentences together from that paper and just copy and paste. You do that, you don't put quotation marks and you don't reference. That's direct plagiarism. You have to put quotation marks if you're copying and pasting, and then you have to reference. Paraphrasing plagiarism is sort of like direct plagiarism, but instead of copying and pasting as in direct plagiarism, what you're doing is you first of all convert it into your own words, but you still don't reference it. So that's paraphrasing plagiarism. Mosaic plagiarism is very interesting. I see this a lot, where there are 3, 4, 5, 6 ideas. It can be 3, 4, 5, 6 parts of different sentences, or it could be actual ideas, and you stitch them together in a patchwork manner, and then pass that new stitched up idea as yours, instead of saying it's actually 5 different ideas or 5 different sentences from 5 different papers. What you should do is, if you stitch those sentences together, you should reference all 5 sources to make it clear that that's not from you. Okay, so that's what mosaic plagiarism is. Accidental plagiarism is the example I gave you earlier, where I said I take Uche's work and I attribute it to Godwin. Okay, well, that's misquoting. That's one. Sometimes I accidentally forget to reference a paper. Now, how can you, if you were the one looking at somebody's work and you come to the conclusion that the person accidentally forgot to quote the paper, how do you know the person accidentally forgot? Because earlier on in the paper, for example, the person has already quoted that reference. But later on in the paper, they take another part of that reference, but they forgot. If they had quoted that reference before, it shows you that they don't have the intent to lie and cheat. They were probably rushing through, and then this other part, they didn't quote it. So that's a case of accidental plagiarism. It's still a problem, technically, but the fact that you've quoted it before and the fact that I know that you don't have any intent, it's one of those things that easily you can get off with a warning, as opposed to self-plagiarism, direct plagiarism, paraphrasing, where intent is implied. That means you wanted to cheat. Consequences of plagiarism, it's basically on you, on your co-authors, and on the institution. As we saw with that prof from Hong Kong University, he may not have, as Dr. Diane said, he may not have been the person who went and used AI. It may have been a student, but his name was on the paper. So his name being on the paper, he was bringing gravitas to the paper. So if he didn't check it, then that's his fault. So somebody in that chain forgot that they bore ultimate responsibility. Either the student who wrote the paper or the prof himself forgot that whether it's the student writing it or it's the AI writing it, it is my responsibility to be the overseer, to be the final checker. This is where it is important to assume responsibility. Once you assume responsibility, you always have to do the final check. If you don't do the final check, then it's your fault. It could affect your academic reputation if you have, for example, one paper, just usually in academia, if you have to have even just one paper retracted, that really shatters your reputation. So if you had more than one paper retracted, forget it. You can go to the market and sell more and more, or become a car salesman, because you're not going to hack it in academia. Professionally as well, it does, because there's academia and there's professionally, but again, both of them is based on the trust for what you're doing. If you are plagiarized in your academic part of your career, then professionally, how can I trust anything that you say? There's ethical implications for intellectual integrity for your institution and for the place that you work, and also for you. Okay, and it generally undermines faith in research. So how do we detect or check for plagiarism? We've got software that does this. So the two common ones are Turnitin and Drillbit. Quite easy to use if you just follow the instructions. You prepare your document in the right format, PDF or Microsoft Word. And there's also, sometimes they'll tell you either just do the IMRAD, so your introduction, methods, results, and discussions, and then cut out the reference section, because there's no point. That would just read high on plagiarism. So you cut that out, and then make sure that the software knows to remove quotes. So whenever there's a quote followed by a reference, then it doesn't count that, because then that's not plagiarized. And then you submit the document, and then it gives you a result for similarity score, which is what you're going to use to determine how much plagiarized material is in the work that you're looking at. Maybe your work, for example. So a report is quickly generated after you submit, and just a few seconds, really. And I'm not very conversant with Drillbit, but Turnitin gives you color-coded highlighting. So if there is a sentence that is flagging as possibly being plagiarized, it might highlight the sentence in green font, in green highlight, and then on the side of the screen it will highlight the source also in green where that came from. So what you're now going to do is look at the source and then try and figure out, is it really plagiarized? Is it that they forgot to quote? Did they quote word for word? Did they paraphrase? And so on and so forth. Okay. So, sorry. Okay. So the overall similarity score is 0 to 10%, 11 to 25%, and greater than 25%. 0 to 10% is very small. You can ignore it. 11 to 25%, you're starting to get to a point where you're asking yourself, maybe there might be something here. It requires a little bit more in depth. You want to check to make sure, what did they do? Is it that they're paraphrasing? Is it that the quotations are not right? Is it that they did not cite, and so on? Over 25%, very, very serious questions need to be raised. At that point in time, if you were an examiner, you will need to have one or two people examine it independently to try and pick out what they supposedly plagiarized and how serious the offense is. At this point, you're now looking to see if you can infer intent by if the person has plagiarized 2 or 3 things from the same, for example, document. So when you're interpreting the plagiarism report, there's a number of things that you need to do. You need to check for quoted material. You need to make sure that material that's supposed to be quoted was quoted. So if the material is not in quotation marks and is not cited, that's 2 different things. Sometimes the material is not exactly quoted verbatim, it's paraphrased. But even if it's paraphrased, it has to be referenced. So you check to make sure that paraphrased material is referenced. Then you have to evaluate common knowledge in the field. So common knowledge in the field are general statements that are well known, so well known in the field that nobody cites them. And the software can pick it up and say that that's plagiarism. So for example, for us, it's glaucoma is the leading cause of irreversible blindness worldwide. There are many places where you see this where it's not cited. But if you write it and you don't cite it, the Turnitin might pick it up and say, oh, you plagiarized that line. So that's one of the things you can say, okay, well, technically, yes, but no. And then you examine the source type. You should be more concerned if the source of plagiarism is an academic paper, because an academic paper is more rigorous compared to, say, a website, where the website might just have a couple of sentences that have high similarity scores with many different things. Red flags to look for when you're looking at the plagiarism report: a large text block match, where you have 3 or more lines of text with no spaces, completely highlighted, meaning that the person most likely copied and pasted. If you have a match with student thesis, which could suggest self-plagiarism or unauthorized collaborations. And if you have high similarities in the wrong areas. Wrong areas as how? So for example, conclusion. The conclusion should be what you found from your study. So how can your conclusion be plagiarized? If your conclusion is plagiarized, that means your whole study is called into question, because your particular study is unique to what you did. Or most of your discussion should be how your results fit in to what's already known. So a lot of it has to be your words. So if you're getting significant plagiarism in the discussion, or especially in the conclusion, that really suggests that the person is deliberately plagiarizing. So, okay, we've almost run out of time. How to avoid plagiarism? My things are very simple. Go old school. Uche doesn't agree. Uche doesn't agree with me on a lot of this, but I'm really, really old school. I will print my papers out, and I will I've got my Sharpies. I've got my Sharpies here. There they are. And I highlight everything. And I've got different colors for green highlight, for example, is something that I can possibly quote. Orange highlight is something that maybe I won't quote it, but it adds to the knowledge of the field and so on and so forth. And when you start writing, you don't really need more than 10 papers to start with. I will get all the 10 papers, read them, and highlight green, yellow, orange, and then I will write the first draft of the paper. This is very important, because then that's your intellectual work. If, looking at what Dr. Diane said earlier on, if I now decide that maybe I want to use AI to help me rephrase it, I will first write what I want to write, how I want to write it, and then get the AI to rephrase it. Now it's already my idea. So anything that is rephrased is just rephrasing my idea. When you are reading papers that you're going to use to write your own paper, understand and paraphrase as much as possible. Don't copy and paste, okay? But remember, as soon as you paraphrase, you cite the reference. As soon as you cite the reference, you go and put it in the reference section, either using an automatic referencing software or doing it manually. Cite as you write. As you are writing, as I said, cite the references. And when you cite, I find it's better to use the Harvard referencing system, because it's easy. It's the last name of the author, or the first 2, or the 2 authors, or 3 authors that are, whichever format you're using. and the year of publication. That way, if you have to go back to the paper to look for that particular thing to make sure that you're citing it properly, you have the authors and the year, as opposed to if you're numbering it. And then after you do that, you make sure that you put the references either manually or automatically in the reference section so that you don't forget. Use plagiarism detection tools for yourself. So before you submit it, just go to Turnitin and make sure that there's no large similarity scores. Okay. And when you're checking, remember you're checking your IMRAD. Cut out the reference section at the end, all the declarations, just your introduction, methods, results, and discussion. That's what you want to make sure that there's no plagiarism in it. And then seek guidance if you're not sure what to do. Thank you very much.
A lie is a lie is a lie. Professor Kelechi emphasizes on owning responsibilities, irrespective of it being self, direct, paraphrasing, mosaic, or accidental type of plagiarism. Watch out, he says, the sections introduction and discussion part, which are your high risk areas. Use appropriate plagiarism tools to analyze and filter out. So he believes in to go old school. I heard the shaggy lines on the first part of your presentation, and print out, highlight the text. First draft should be done, and then you can seek assistance with the help of AI. Understand what you are drafting, paraphrase it, and when you paraphrase, Professor emphasized on using this references or cite your references. American Academy of Optometry has made a plagiarism module mandatory to all candidates from this year, available at the portal. In the end, the most important thing is to seek guidance. And I would say I was successful throughout because of my mentor, Professor Levy. So definitely do not hesitate to seek guidance from your mentor and your seniors. I hope I've summarized it well, Professor. Okay. Let's check out if there are any questions. More, I see more of comments for both of the presenters. Professor Diane, they said it was an excellent presentation, and for Professor Kelechi, they have mentioned it as very insightful and very deep. And there's a question from Dr. Marcus. He wants to know, I think I missed his part. Yeah. How can you have the original idea without needing to reference? That is one of his questions.
Okay, if the idea is originally yours, then you don't have to reference it. Just state it. If the idea is something that, let's say, came from when you were discussing with your friend, but your friend hasn't published it, then you can actually just put your friend's last name and then write personal communication. But if it's your idea, you can write it, because actually, if we go back to what we see now with the old scientists like Isaac Newton and the rest of them, we find out that many of the times they had the same idea at the same time. The only reason why we hear, oh, Isaac Newton came up with this, is because we are biased towards the English world, so we were only following the English publications. But the Germans were doing the same thing, the French were doing the same thing, the Arabs sometimes were doing the same thing before. So it's not unusual to have people thinking about the same thing in slightly different ways. We had this one we're talking about when we're trying to figure out what HIV was, and so there's HIV, and I think there was something called HTLV, and there was a lab in the States working on it, and there was a lab in France working at it at around the same time, and they came to the same conclusion by different parts independently. So it is possible to have your own idea. If you have your own idea, then just write it without referencing it. If somebody then challenges you, you can now then say, this is my idea, this is how I came about that idea.
Okay, there's one more question for you, sir. Dr. Igioma wants to understand the difference between common facts one should cite or leave in their own words. And also, she wanted to know about the statements like conjunctivitis is the inflammation of the conjunctiva. So she wants to elaborate.
That's a very good question. So I've my old age, I found out that common sense is not so common. What's common sense in Australia is upside down in New Zealand. What if I use my common sense in New Zealand and I go to Nigeria? At the airport, I'll lose all my belongings. So I have a different brain I put in every country I go to. So common facts should be generally known. But the way I do it is, if in doubt, reference. That's it. So, like, the common fact about glaucoma is the leading cause of irreversible blindness. That's a common fact because almost any paper that you pick up about glaucoma will state that at the beginning. So one of the ways you establish common facts is that if you just, on the topic, pick up at random 15 or 20 papers, many of them will state it, and you will find that when many of them state it, they don't reference it. That's how you know it's a common fact. But if in doubt, choose 3 or 4 references and then just reference them. It's not that hard. But yes, that's a very good question. And because we have to be careful to say, because especially when you're working with things like glaucoma, in subject areas like that, there are lots of papers on it. But for example, there was a paper that I wrote with one of my colleagues that was, he'd done a surgery for somebody that had ptosis. And he was talking about how, all the stitches and so on. That is so esoteric. So there were many times when he would say, oh, this is well known. I'm like, yeah, but this is well known in the sub-branch of ophthalmology. General ophthalmologists don't know this. So it's not well known. So we have to reference it. So what's well known and what's well known depends on how general the topic is. But always, if in doubt, reference.
Thank you, sir. I don't find any more questions. So with that, we would come to the end of the session with the closing remarks from Dr. Leve.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tanuja, and thank you everyone for this wonderful, thought-provoking session. Look, I want to thank the speakers especially for making time to make this a very interesting presentation. I know the time it takes to walk through your presentations, revise it, practice it, make sure you're speaking the right language. There's a lot of commitment to this. I'm really grateful for having you guys take on this. And on behalf of the leadership, I just want to share a quick slide with you guys. I think this is our first presentation for the year. And we're kicking off this year in a very different way. Now, the Academy, like they said, has produced a roadmap to avoiding plagiarism. I would recommend anyone who's writing for the Academy or going through the candidate fellowship journey to please review this. The penalty for plagiarism, at some point, there's some leniency because we had to plead that some people were not too conversant with writing. At this stage, that's no more acceptable. We've had people who have been banned for 3 years, who have been banned for more than 3 years because of this. So I do recommend that if you're in doubt, like Kelechi is saying, put a reference. And don't submit articles without your mentors reading them. The more people read, the more they make corrections on your document, the more you change the language and revise it, you're reducing that plagiarism unintentionally because that article goes to different rounds of review. So it does help you to even send it to somebody else to make some corrections for you. To read through, you could see the person's language coming, it changes the way, even if you've copied the sentence without knowing, that could actually change that to look different. So please don't be in a hurry to submit documents and then get penalized for 3 years. You can start early and let other people review your work. That's why we have mentors. And so what we did was we kind of produced a quick checklist on some of the things that we think are happening in our space. One of the things is from the key messages here, plagiarism and over-reliance on AI, we know undermines academic integrity. Diane and Kelechi has proven that from their presentation, and Tanuja did a good work in summarizing that. AI, like Diane said, is a support tool, not a substitute for original thinking and critical thinking. So please, less reliance on that and make sure you're using to refine your work. And just to state that fellowship is not for every optometrist in Africa. Everybody doesn't have to be a fellow. We appreciate the 826 members on our candidate platform. That's awesome, but it doesn't mean that everybody there will get fellowship. So it may not be for you. That platform is one for learning, for networking. The other thing is also for candidates who want to be fellows. So you can attend these lectures without being a fellow. That's okay, because we are learning from the journey. So don't listen when people say you're on the candidate. Everybody doesn't have to be a fellow. It's not for everyone. And I mean that because if it doesn't mean something different to you, it's not relevant. There must be a benefit of being a fellowship to you as an individual. What do you want to gain out of this? If you cannot find that reason, don't bother taking this step because it's a tedious step. Only for those who are dedicated, know what they want from it, and they want to pursue it. So don't be frustrated if it's not for you. It's okay. It doesn't have to be everyone. There are other things that you could do as an optometrist. So please, you can be on the platform and learn with colleagues, connect with people, network, attend events. Do not feel obliged to be a fellow. It's not for everyone. So membership of the Academy as well delivers significant professional, educational, and networking benefits besides just being a fellow. Once you're a member, you get access to the resources, you get access to become, to join different research groups without even being a fellow. You can read the articles, you can attend meetings. It's okay. You can still get all those benefits that are open for membership and not just for those ones for fellows. So there are two different things. So do not think that we are making anyone or compelling anyone to become a fellow when you join the platform. It's also a platform for learning and making sure you get the information like these webinars are posted there that you can attend. So what matters to us is the journey of learning. The journey of learning how to write, learning how to use evidence-based, learning what technique is there for practicing, learning what good clinical practice is. That's what we want you to gain from this. Every benefit about the end of the journey, getting your label, your lapel, your fellowship badge, it's okay. But not everybody needs to get that. So please do not feel that you're obliged to become a fellow by just joining the candidate portal. Now, we created few dot points, few checklists for everyone, fellows and candidates, because we want people to remind themselves of these things. We wanted to always maintain your active membership status. Keep your personal details up to date. Sometimes your profile is outdated. You got a promotion recently. You haven't updated it to a professorship, or your clinic address has changed. Please update those on the portal. It's important because the academy may want to contact you. We want to reach out to you. Your email may have changed. Please go onto the portal and change that to the right email. And I urge you to use emails that you check often because most messages come in, you're not even seeing them. Sometimes your review is back 3 weeks ago. You don't know. You keep writing the subcommittee chair, whereas you also have your review in your email. So please use an email that you check and regularly that is functional. Regularly renew your AO email. Like I said, newsletters, official communications come there. Track your fellowship maintenance requirement. If you're already a fellow, it doesn't end there. There are processes to maintain your fellowship, and people forget this. Then they lose their fellowship, or it becomes too late, and they feel like they're frustrated. It's too much work to do. We've had people who are going to renew their fellowship again. Now it's a tedious journey because you're now starting afresh to do that. So please make sure you read up how to maintain your fellowship. We had a previous presentation last year about that. It's on our YouTube channel from the iAfrica Media. Please go there and watch that again because it tells you what you can do to keep your fellowship active. So it's also good to plan to present an abstract. The academy is coming up soon, and there will be calls for abstract and papers. It's for everybody who is either a fellow or a member. If you're traveling to the US, why don't you just present an abstract? Why don't you participate in the scientific session, be a speaker, volunteer in a session? You can volunteer by introducing speakers in a session. That's great. You can volunteer in sharing flyer. There's booths where academy needs people to be part of it. Be part of that. Let's be seen as contributing, not just taking away from the academy. That's what we have turned this chapter to be. Let's be part of the system and make sure that that change we want, we can start to implement them from our own little spaces. So you don't have to be a fellow to volunteer. You don't have to be a fellow to present an abstract. It's open to anyone. So your case report can actually be your abstract at the academy. And once accepted, you get 5 points for it. So your next fellowship journey, you already have 5 points in the bucket. So those are other ways that you can look at contributing as well. So work towards timely submission of your review articles. Don't wait until the deadline to start writing. If you want to meet up the 2026 oral exam, it's actually too late if you haven't started writing now, because you must have finished your first writing and submitting early February. So if you haven't started writing now, sorry, you can't be a fellow this year. You have to then work towards 2027. So you need to actually start planning early and make sure that you're submitting your documents as at when due. Because there is no pardon in deadlines with the academy. It happens at that time and they shut down everyone. So please, let's work towards that. Engage with the sessions that they have, the scientific resources, the webinars that we hold. I'm disappointed that most of the candidates are not here. We have about 826 people on our portal. And I tell you this plagiarism is one of the biggest things anyone will have to be careful about. And like Kelechi said, your introduction, your discussion is the real culprit of plagiarism. And you need to learn how to write. And this was an important point that I wanted to start the journey for 2026 with this session. So it's really critical that those who did not attend find time to listen to the audios and to the recording when it's out. Apply or nominate peers for AI award. Very soon the awards will be called soon. If you know somebody who is doing great at one section or the other that we can nominate, please put up your hand and nominate someone. We want Africans to be seen for the things that we do well in. There's quality and depth in this group. No, let's not shy away from those opportunities. If you don't get it now after nomination, it's okay. Next year you can try. Let's put up our hands and put our people up there to be recognized for the work they do. We don't sit at the back seat all the time. Let's be there to participate and also to win those awards. It's a prestige for the association as well. So participate in our chapters, acknowledge the evolving international travel. Look, we know the journey to America now is a bit difficult. There's been all these Trump ideas and American change in visa status. We understand that. And I think we are working with the academy to see other opportunities that people can participate. It's possible that this year there might be a virtual platform for people to attend. I'm not sure, but we are thinking about that in the international committee as well. Because this visa stuff affects many African countries, if not some other North American countries as well. So I think we need to really find a way to still engage people and not let them lose interest because they're not going to attend the physical conference itself. So please don't be discouraged by that. These are transitional periods and those things might change as well. So stay connected with us, and we think with these few things, just want to let you know that we did complete the evaluation of the fellowship last year. Very soon, that will be disseminated. We're trying to write that up. It just tells us where we were and where we're going to be in the next 5 years. So hopefully that article will come out and people will have a read. And I just want to close that by saying thank you, everybody. Thank you for staying put for this workshop. And please share the slides or the recording when it's out with colleagues who are not here and who should be part of this to make sure that we are all on the same page while going through this study. And big thanks to everybody who is joining us. So thank you, Tanuja. I hand that over to you now.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for your positive and inspiring closing remarks. Let us all bow our heads down in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the knowledge, wisdom, and fellowship shared during this webinar, organized by the African chapter of American Academy of Optometry. As we conclude, we pray to Thee to apply what we learn to improve the lives of our patients. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.